About a week ago, I put a message up asking you guys to submit chord progressions that I could then improvise over. And I got a lot of responses, so not everybody's chord progression will be here, but I'll try and get a bit of variety in there because some were really long, some were just about 4 chords long, and some were really quite jazzy. So let's see how we get on with these. I've got them here on my iPad. And we'll start with one of the shorter but quite interesting chord progressions. This one, which goes C, E minor, G minor, E minor. So it's the G minor there, which is quite intriguing because getting E minor and G minor together is unusual. So this is the E minor, this is the G minor. So as you can hear, up against each other, they're quite different sounds, resulting in quite a jarring sound. But we can make this work, so let's do that right now. So I think the chord there which I would change is the final chord, the E minor, the return to E minor, because when we go to G minor, it's like we're getting moved away from the key of C. So then to suddenly jump back to E minor is a little bit jarring, and then when it comes back round to C to restart the progression, we feel a little bit lost tonally. So what I would do is swap the final E minor out for an F chord, which would better wrap round, it would better prepare us to return to the beginning of the progression, a bit like this. So F just keeps everything in a nice little loop, and when you're working with a chord progression that is a 4-chord loop, you want it to tie back round nicely. So speaking of 4-chord loops, we actually have here probably the most infamous of all 4-chord loops, what's known as the axis of awesome chord progression. 1, 5, 6, 4. It's been used in countless songs, but for good reason, because it's a great progression. So let's give it a little jam. Let's change the sound we're on as well. Okay, let's give it a go. So one of my favourite things to do actually in this progression is between the 5 chord and the 6 chord, in this example between the G and the A minor, is throw in a little passing chord, throw in that little diminished chord between the two. So between G and A minor we'd have G sharp diminished very briefly, like this. But yeah, that's a timeless chord progression, you can't go wrong with that, which is why there are so many songs with that progression. A sort of similar progression that we've been suggested here is this one, C, E7, A minor, D and G. So why I say it's similar is we've still got our C and our A minor in the same place. In the place of the G we have E7, which actually acts in quite a similar way to the G chord. It acts to move us on to the next chord quite nicely. And then in the place of F, we have more of a turnaround, which points us back to the beginning of the progression. So it's in a similar sound, but it's got a lot more chromatic notes to it. C, G, A minor, F had no chromatic notes. C, E7, A minor, D, and G features that G sharp in the E7 chord, and the F sharp in the D chord. So we're going to have a few moments where we're stepping slightly out of the key, which is great. Let's change the sound again. So I took a few liberties there with chord extensions, adding a few sevens and that sort of thing. But that's a lovely progression. I always love that secondary dominant thing of going from the root chord, then to the major version or the dominant version of the 3 chord, then to 6. Very satisfying. So this next chord progression is very much in the minor key. As you can see, we've got a diminished chord and 3 minor chords, which is going to make it sound quite different from the progressions we've done so far. But that's great, let's try it out. So I was hearing that in the key of A minor. The thing is with these chords, because we haven't got a major chord, it's hard for any one chord to sound overwhelmingly like the home bass. Not because the major chord itself would sound like the home bass, like the tonic, but major chords have a way of pointing us towards a tonic. So for example, if that E minor was an E major, it would very much hit home we're in the key of A minor, because the E major would be like the dominant chord to the tonic chord. So let's do that. So E as a dominant chord. So even though the E7 that I added in there didn't come immediately before the A minor, it set the context that A minor is where we want to resolve to. So Paul Muller from Patreon has offered a different 4-chord progression. This is from looking at it, it's a simple but effective chord progression: F, F sus4, D minor, C. Let's try this out. So I do love that sus chord. There's something just so satisfying about a suspended chord. So Tony Lovell, also from Patreon, has suggested a couple little chord progressions, very similar, but with a small change. The first one has a D sharp augmented chord. Second one swaps that for E augmented. So very close, but that's going to be interesting. Let's try it out. The second time. So I think I prefer the first run where we get the D sharp augmented, because that leads us very nicely to the A minor 7, whereas the E augmented, it still leads us there, but it's not as satisfying a resolution. D sharp augmented. It's just very satisfying. So Aaron Clift has given us a particularly long chord progression, one which is also full of upper chord extensions. He's also asked for it to be played as a ballad, so quite slowly, 56 BPM. Let's give it a go. That's interesting. I think the chords, it's an interesting sort of development of chords. It doesn't necessarily take you on the most satisfying journey. It doesn't wrap around or anything. So like that final chord, the B minor 11 chord, doesn't necessarily make you want to go back to the start again of D major 9. It kind of does, it kind of doesn't. I think I would go for some sort of dominant chord in that position to give you that sense of tension to pull you back round to the top. But yeah, really interesting. And it's certainly chocked full of upper chord extensions. So somebody's actually just asked for the chord progression from Just, which is a great chord progression, C, E flat, D, F. C, E flat, D, F. Quite unusual, really. What's great about this progression is you get a very satisfying chromatic line going on in it. From the C chord, if you go to E flat, you've got a G in that chord, and then the D chord has the the D chord has an F sharp note, and the F chord has the F note, and when you come back round to C again, you've got the E note. So you can have a line that goes, nice chromatic line running through the chords. So let's finish off with this one. Pepper Gin is literally just asking for some classic jazzy 2-5-1s. So a 2-5-1, if you're not aware, is referring to the second, fifth and first degrees of the scale. So if we're in C, for example, the second degree of the scale was D, so we'd put a D minor chord there. Fifth degree of the scale is G, so we put a G chord there. And the first degree is C. And this is a super common chord progression in jazz. But you don't typically stay in one key when you play it. You'd usually use the 2-5-1s to then move to other keys. So that, just there, I went through the keys of, well, I started in C, then I went to the key of E flat, then to the key of D flat, then back to the key of C. And 2-5-1s just allow that to happen so efficiently. So let me just jam through some 2-5-1s. I'll try and keep you on track of which key I'm in, but I might lose track myself. But let's start in the key of C. Let's move to the key of E flat. Move back to C now. Let's move to F. So I went a bit nuts there with 251s. And I'm not going to say what I just did was tasteful because it went a bit off the rails. But it shows you how you can move between so many different keys in a relatively fluid fashion. That the music can just keep flowing, and you can always navigate back home if you want to using a 251. So you can move to any key really, and keep it sounding cohesive. So thank you to everybody who submitted chord progressions for this. If you found this interesting, I'd love to do it again. So let me know in the comments, and hopefully next time I'll be able to cover even more people's chord progressions. Thanks very much.